Hello, I'm Brian with glutenfreehomebrewing.com. Today we have both the Grainfather mash and boil with pump and the Grainfather. We're going to discuss some of the differences between these two systems. The first thing I want to point out is that we are working with the mash and boil with pump, so they're both the all-in-one recirculating systems. I have a little bit of a list here so I can touch on some things I thought were important. There's probably far more things that we could discuss, but I'm going to try and just focus on a few of them. They both feature a removable grain basket that when raised out after the mash, after they're raised out of the primary vessel, they both have supports on top that you rest the grain basket on, and then you can sparge from the top. So you're essentially batch sparging, and this isn't a floating grain bill at that point because you're completely moving the basket, all the liquid is flowing out, and then you're sparging from the top. They both allow for manual operation from the control pads. So there's a control pad here on the mash and boil and a control pad here on the Grainfather. So they both allow for manual operation directly from the control pad. They both have customer support. Both companies support their products. So if you have questions, issues, just trying to understand how to use the system, I've found them both helpful. They both have adjustable flow rates, so when you're recirculating, you can adjust the flow rate so that you have the right amount of wort flowing over the grain bill. The mash and boil with pump has a ball valve, which the Grainfather does not. So when you're done with the boil on both systems, you can use the pump to pump into the primary fermentation tank, but the mash and boil does have the additional ball valve, so that's kind of a nice feature. I do want to draw some attention to the pump though. The Grainfather makes it really convenient to access the pump if needed because it has an external pump. The Brewer's Edge has an internal pump, so it's actually built into the bottom of the system. While the Grainfather made theirs very accessible, I've never actually noticed a need to access it because it actually has a filter on the pump inlet, and the Brewer's Edge mash and boil, we notice, does not have a pump on the, a filter on the inlet. So between the two of them, if you're going to get a clogged pump, if you get a clogged pump, it would be far easier to access the Grainfather's pump, but then ironically, the Brewer's Edge is the system that's possibly more prone because it doesn't have that filter inlet. Having said that, and having used the Grainfather, I still highly recommend using some types of hops basket, like a stainless steel hops basket or hops bags, to prevent the filter or the pump from being clogged. So even though the Grainfather has an external pump that's easily accessible and it does have a filter in the pump inlet, I found that it still gets clogged pretty easily, and you want to just minimize as much solid mass going through, getting pulled in to that inlet, getting stuck to the filter, and then possibly in the pump itself. So I recommend whichever system you get to use some type of hops filter or bag regardless. The Grainfather, as a lot of people point out, is considerably more expensive than the mash and boil with pump. With the Grainfather, you're paying for a lot of technology. You're paying for things like designing your recipes and importing your recipes onto their website. You can design, I've done this, and I'm not even very technologically well sophisticated. You've seen some of my blogs and you've kind of rolled with my mistakes. And I've designed entire recipes in bed with my phone and just programmed it right in there and didn't even get out of bed. You can pre-program step mashes and just have that saved, and then when you get to that section of the recipe, just plug it in. It can be completely automated. It's Bluetooth, it hooks up to an app on your phone, it prompts you for every single thing you need to do. There's a lot of technology built into it, whereas the Brewer's Edge, if you're coming from like a cooler mash tun system where you have to kind of calculate strike water, the volume and the temperature, if you, when your additions are needed, doing all the math that goes along with the non-technology version like the Grainfather. If you're used to that and you're on a budget, by all means, this is a great upgrade to a cooler mash system. if you've been brewing for a while, and let me just move that out of the way. If you've been brewing for a while and you're just kind of tired of doing those things, or you're forgetful and you've messed up too many beers in the past because you forgot one step or forgot one ingredient, the Grainfather might be more up your alley. Having said that, I want to discuss a couple other differences too. The Grainfather, I'd have to confirm this with the Brewer's Edge Mash and Boil, but the Grainfather I know you can adjust for altitude. I'm at a much higher altitude, so my boil temperature is a little bit lower than it is if I was at sea level. So I know that there's an override on the Grainfather for that. And then also I wanted to point out that the Brewer's has this little dandy hole in the lid here that allows for a thermometer when you're doing checking the temperature. I don't know if that's because, and I know they have a thermometer for the computer system, so I don't know if that's just an extra feature for because they could throw it into the system, or if people using the system have found it necessary. The Grainfather, on the other hand, has a lid, and I will also point this out as well, is the lid has a hole in the center so that when you are recirculating, you actually put this lid on there and it helps maintain the temperature. When you're doing the mash on the mash and boil, this is really just a lid for the kettle itself, so when you're recirculating, the recirculating arm is on, you're not going to have the lid on. So as far as keeping and maintaining that temperature, there might be a little bit of advantage to the Grainfather. Again, these are just thoughts. I haven't actually tested one with another extensively to make these comparisons. These are just observations looking at the design of the two systems. The other significant difference is the grain basket. So the grain basket on the Grainfather, the bottom actually, and you might have seen this on the previous video, this whole bottom plate removes. There's a little silicone seal around the side, and then there's actually an overflow pipe in the center. That becomes really helpful when you're installing the stainless steel mesh screen, because, and I'll use the top plate to illustrate this, but when you put the stainless steel mesh screen on the bottom plate on the Grainfather, you can kind of help hold it in place by using the seal, and then when you install the overflow pipe in the center, that really holds the stainless steel mesh screen in place really well on the Grainfather. On the mash and boil, the bottom of the grain basket is one solid piece. So the stainless steel mesh screen is going to essentially sit at the bottom without that silicone, the benefit of that silicone seal holding in place, without the benefit of the overflow pipe in the middle holding in place. It essentially is just going to be free floating. So in the stainless steel mesh screen kit that you get from us, we include little stainless steel twist ties. It's the best solution we could think of at this time, and if you have any better suggestions or ideas, please let us know, but there's really no way to truly hold it in place like you can on the Grainfather. So there is an advantage for this modification to the Grainfather. So I've been going on for a little bit now. We are brewing with both systems, and we are going to do another tutorial, or I'm sorry, not tutorial, but video using the Brewer's Edge upcoming. We're going to brew with it with somebody new to brewing, kind of give a new to brewing perspective using the system, and we're going to do a quick follow-up video on actually installing the stainless steel mesh screen. So that's it for today. Again, just kind of like a basic overview, some of our thoughts, some of our observations, and some of our experiences with the two systems. I'm Brian with glutenfreehomebrewing.com. Thanks for watching.